We've got Tegan Kline from Edge and Node, one of the core folks that has implemented the graph. Tegan, welcome. We have Kwon from Terra, and we have Tess from Interchain working on Cosmos. Welcome all. Come on down. All right, so what did Gavin get wrong? No, seriously, it might be helpful just to do a quick round of introductions because we're going to talk about interoperability and the multi-chain future, but very different perspectives that are on stage here. So maybe we'll just spend kind of 30 seconds. Doe, we'll start with you, and then we'll kind of move this way on kind of what you're working on, and maybe the one-liner of how you view crypto as a multi-asset, interoperable ecosystem.
Yeah, so I'm Doe. I'm the founder of Terra. So for those of you who are not aware, Terra has a number of stablecoins that are pegged to various different currencies and is algorithmic, so and therefore decentralized. So sort of our interest in a multi-chain future is that these stablecoins live across bridges in multiple blockchains like Ethereum, Solana, Binance Smart Chain, and I think Polygon, and so on and so forth. So I sort of think that as a lot of these blockchains succeed and build ecosystems on top of them, there's going to be sort of base assets and liquidity that help to foster consistency across lots of different platforms.
Yeah. Tegan?
Thank you. I'm Tegan Kline. I'm the co-founder of Edge and Node, and I was on the initial team behind the graph. So the graph actually helps with interoperability at the indexing and query layer. So the graph currently supports 24 different networks, including Ethereum, Binance Smart Chain, Polygon, and many, many others. And so we really help to kind of decentralize blockchains and make it easier for developers to access blockchain data and serve that data to their users. And so we are big proponents of a multi-blockchain future. We think we need to stop the infighting across the crypto space and really kind of band together. And in order to do that, we need bridges, we need interoperability at that indexing and query layer.
Tess?
Yeah, I'm Tess Rinearson. I'm the VP of Engineering at Interchain, and I'm also on the Foundation Council there. Interchain, I think most people know, we build Cosmos, which came up a few times in the last session. I would also just say that Interchain and Cosmos really have been all about building the primitives for a multi-chain future, like from the very beginning. So, one of the first projects that came out of that ecosystem was Tendermint Core, one of the first and still very, very popular proof of stake consensus engines. And all of these things are kind of the things you need if you're going to have a world with many, many chains. Yeah, so I think we've been all in on the multi-chain future all along.
I'll start with maybe a basic question, and maybe this is a little bit repetitive, but we have three very unique perspectives here for folks that are in the trenches. And that is, over the last 12 to 18 months, this now seems like a foregone conclusion that we're going to have this multi-chain, like interoperable crypto ecosystem with a lot of layer ones, a lot of applications, and a lot of bridges between them. Aside from just transactions and the different asset types that have really taken off, first on Ethereum, but now on some of these other chains, do you think that this is, obviously we think that this is the future, but what do you think changed in the minds of developers, of investors, over the course of the last 12 months? Is it simply just the simplest answer, which is Ethereum hit its transaction limit, so now we must have other alternatives and routes around some of those throughput bottlenecks? Or is it something deeper at a technical level or at just a cultural level that people want to solve for? Maybe Tess, we start with you this time.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, I don't think you can discount the scalability issues and the transaction fees and all of that. That is a factor, right? But I think there is also a deeper cultural thing happening as well, which is that we're starting to see, in the crypto space, in the blockchain space, just a much broader, more diverse group of people involved, a much broader, more diverse set of projects involved. And all of these projects are going to have different needs, and every technology choice you make is going to serve you in different ways, right? And like I have an engineering background, obviously, and you're not going to use like MySQL is a great database, right, for many things. It's very popular for a reason, but it's not the right solution for every problem. And I think we see the same thing with blockchains, where you're just going to have different. You're going to want to choose technology that is really optimized for what you're trying to do. And I think that's where we really see these application-specific blockchains come into play.
Yeah, I echo a lot of that. I think if we rewind 1 year ago, thinking about a multi-blockchain future was actually quite contrarian. It was Ethereum, and that was it. And thankfully, a lot of projects saw past that, and they saw different use cases for different networks. And now we have a bunch of different layer ones, both EVM and not EVM compatible, layer twos, optimistic rollups kind of replacing sharding, and ZK as well. And so that's all very exciting. And then also we have like side chains. And I think each will have its own use case in this space. But what happened, if we rewind, was DeFi really took off. And in June, just as a data point, and the graph is kind of a proxy for what happens on these different chains. And if we rewind to June of 2020, there was 1 billion queries per month in Ethereum. And that's really exploded to over 1 billion queries a day on average in Ethereum today. And comparing this to the internet, the early days of the internet, and 2 years into Google was doing 13 million queries a day, and we're already doing 1 billion queries in Web3. And that's huge. And so I think all of these chains will need all of these use cases.
Thank you to the graph, making life easy. Joe, thoughts to add here?
Yeah,
a few things that I want to poke on those first two answers, but we can.
Yeah, so it seems like every bull market, the industry relearns a really uncomfortable truth of block space gentrification, right? So, so what I mean is, yeah, there's tons of use cases I can build on top of blockchains, but why should my swap be more expensive just because some cat, like 10,000 cat NFTs dropped, right? So, I mean, it just stands to reason that, maybe, just maybe, having one city where everybody can live in is a bad idea. And similarly, maybe it's a bad idea to stick all the applications into one global computer. So I think that's why fundamentally, irrespective of what types of use cases eventually get built up on top of blockchains, maybe it just makes sense to have a multi-chain future. Now, I think the difference between now and 2017, and this is coming from the perspective of somebody that tried to build on lots of different platforms around that era, was nothing in that timeline was usable, right? So if you wanted to build on, I don't even remember the names of these things, but like, yeah, but it was like simply impossible. And when you go talk to the devs and ask them, hey, look, like it seems like we can't do this, they'll be like, oh, why don't you wait? We'll give you $10 million, right? So yeah, we don't have that problem anymore. Like if you look at the top competing L1s to Ethereum, like Avalanche and Solana, and lots of these ecosystems, like the dev tooling is a little weaker, but it's a vibrant ecosystem. It's possible to build great products.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Talk a little bit about, let's elaborate on that, because you're built on Cosmos today. How have you thought about expanding Terra's multi-blockchain development itself? Because a lot of the lock-in is still using Cosmos today, correct?
Yeah, so Terra is a blockchain that is built using Tendermint and the Cosmos SDK, and these are great technologies. But in the beginning, our intention wasn't to become a layer 1 blockchain. That sort of happened by accident. Mm-hmm. So the goal was to encode a set of monetary policies governing Terra stablecoins into the blockchain. And the goal was to use those decentralized stablecoins to service applications in multiple different ecosystems. But we built up, we added like an execution layer module built by the guys at Cosmosm, which is sort of like a WebAssembly execution layer, in order to build just a couple of different applications. Like for example, Anchor, which offers high stable yields on Terra stablecoins, and also sort of like a synthetics platform called Mirror, whereby you can use stablecoins to invest in any asset class in the world, be it from equities to commodities to ETFs. But once we launched those things, that sort of led to sort of like an explosion in third-party developer interest, and somehow like Terra ended up being like the third largest chain in terms of TVL, and by lots of usership metrics. So
How would you categorize your relationship now with the Cosmos ecosystem? Have you kind of graduated from using Cosmos to focusing more on developing your own layer 1, or is it still kind of deeply embedded in the stack?
no, so I think Cosmos infrastructure is actually the best place where you can sort of build a baseline for an interconnected multi-chain future. And that's because there's tons of different bridges that are built out to different ecosystems. Like, for example, the shuttle bridge that we built out to connect Ethereum, for instance. But quite honestly, these are quite centralized and will not stand the test of time. So there's like $1 billion in shuttle right now, which just I operate. And I think people just assume I won't steal $1 billion. Which is fair. I probably won't. But I think going forward, I think it makes sense for most of these bridges to be provably secure, either by having a significant number of validators in the relayer set, or by having something that is like client-based, like IBC, and can sort of conform to lots of different proof-of-stake blockchains.
Tess, what has Cosmos gotten right in terms of promoting developer adoption and really kind of hammering home that this sandbox that you all have created is maybe the best place, at least to boot up, but potentially a long-term backbone for your blockchain if you're not building on Ethereum?
Yeah, absolutely. So just to sort of actually build on what Do was saying, I do think that IBC is just like like the best solution for interoperability moving forward. You don't have to trust, a set of relayers in a bridge. There is a relayer, but you don't have to trust them. They just relay transactions back and forth, and the blockchains are really the light clients where sort of the respective blockchains can do their own validation. So you're not adding a new trusted party or sort of complicating the trust model in that way. And I think that's really important, as we build sort of these increasingly complex topologies of blockchains. One of the things that Cosmos has done very deliberately, and that I'm very proud of, is that we actually don't fight to lock people in. Like, I think you use the phrase lock in, but that's actually not what we're about. We want to give people really, really great tools and continue to just like entice them to stay with us by providing these great solutions and giving people highly modular tools that they can work with. So you can build a Cosmos chain with IBC. Obviously, that's very easy to do. But if for some reason, I don't know why you would do this, but if for some reason someone didn't want to connect into the Interchain and be part of that, you can still use the Cosmos SDK without it. If you don't want to use Tendermint Core, fine, you can use your own solution. These things are very pluggable. I think we are driving towards continuing to provide better and better solutions for developers, especially, to be honest, I think we haven't actually always done the best job of serving brand new blockchains because these chains have had to go out and build their own validator sets. Now, I think that is something that, honestly, I think a lot of validators are looking for new chains to validate. So, I think our validator community is pretty amazing. So I think that's not an insurmountable hurdle by any means, but we're really working on our own shared security solutions, and we're calling it Interchain security, of course, that will really let these new chains bootstrap themselves by borrowing security from pre-existing chains, and just trying to really flesh out that ecosystem. So I would say actually I think we've done a pretty good job of supporting new projects that want to get started on Cosmos, and we're about to do a really good job.
I've been in crypto for 8 years. I've been an information analyst or touching information businesses for about as long as I've been in. And this stuff is very, very hard to keep up with. So if you think about the cycles that we go through, I'm oversimplifying, but really good developer team ships something novel that actually works, speculation follows, and then infrastructure follows. Tegan, how fast can the graph build out support for this multi-chain future? Because right now, a lot of the infrastructure, and it's not just indexing protocols, but a lot of the infrastructure in general is still oriented around an EVM compatible, like long-term Ethereum maximalist future? And how does that change, and at what speed does that change? Because that really seems like the limiting factor in getting people comfortable building outside of the EVM sandbox.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's interesting to see people are building on other networks besides Ethereum, but they're not just going to one layer 1 or one layer 2. They're going everywhere, and so that's causing kind of fragmentation with the user experience, with liquidity, with developer experience. But we need developers, and the graph has added about 24 EVM compatible networks in the last few months. And we'll be adding support for the first non-EVM compatible networks, Solana and Near, in the coming months.
How about Cosmos?
Yes, we're looking at Cosmos as well. And actually, Cosmos is one of the most vibrant validator communities I think I've seen in the space.
One of the things we touched on a little bit in the conversation with Gavin, but I'll kind of present to the group here. Because of the complexity and the fact that the infrastructure has to catch up still, it seems like interoperability, in some respects, creates more risks than it's worth today. So you will eat the higher fees on the more established platforms that are a little bit safer to develop on, because you have the rest of the developer ecosystem rallying around it, and you have the tools in place to build reliably and not have to roll your own for every single kind of edge case, every single solution that you need. How do you think about the risks of bridges to some of these off-ramps or some of these higher throughput systems that are less mature and less sophisticated right now, just because that's where they are in the phase of their evolution? And does that create, if you take it a step further, even like cascading risks when we're talking about financial applications in particular, right? Could a stable coin unwind? Could we have some type of deleveraging event that really cripples like an entire community of holders on one of these more, I don't want to call them exploratory chains, but one of the more nascent blockchains, because just by age, they're 6 months old or a year old versus 5 years old?
So the way that I think about it is that a lot of these blockchains sort of from a sort of political standpoint, they're sort of nation states, and then you have these bridges whereby you essentially like treaties and economic relationships between different nation states. So for example, if you take a US Treasury, for instance, I would say sort of the security of a US Treasury that is being held by a US corporation is much more secure than a US security, US Treasury that is being held by, like China, for instance. Because there's sort of like cliff risk whereby, there's sort of like a economic war between two different countries, and then like the Fed suddenly decides we will stop honoring these US Treasuries, right? So I think, but at the same time, I think people learn to accept that cliff risk, and over time that risk goes down, right? So I don't think we're quite at a stage where people are comfortable, slinging, $100 million across different bridges into assets that are not native to that particular chain. But at the same time, sort of the native assets still have, risks like smart contract failures and, liquidations not working correctly. So I think risk is all around us. Right? But hopefully the multi-chain future will be brighter.
Some of us thrive in risk.
Exactly. So that's the application kind of builder. I think the two ways that you can de-risk some of this activity is through better information products that kind of give other developers, other business builders, the confidence that they know what's going on because they have a dashboard or they have the ability to at least query these chains directly. And then there's the technical items that you can de-risk. So Tegan, Tess, whichever order you want to go in, how do you think about solving those particular challenges? And what are the milestones that you think need to be hit to get people comfortable that we're not just building a house of cards where we pull one and a lot of things come crashing down? Because if we've seen anything in the last couple of months, that's the disaster, doomsday, borderline existential scenario where we are right now on the political, like outside of crypto, political realm in terms of regulation and how different authorities feel about these emerging apps.
Yeah, well, I think this is why decentralization is so important. And thankfully, there are projects that have been working on bridges for some time that really put decentralization at the forefront. And I think decentralization is really important at every layer of the stack. And decentralization takes time. And so right now, there are certain elements that do need to be centralized in order for it to work. But I view all of those as kind of short-term solutions. And whoever builds these bridges in a decentralized way, I think will be the winner.
Do you think people trust centralized firms or decentralized tech today?
I absolutely think, I mean, if we look across the space, there's certain projects that have sacrificed or they've kind of given the trade-off to be a little bit more centralized for other reasons, and people are trusting them. And so, yes. Yeah.
Long term, that's bad, but today,
It's working.
it's arguably a
working
necessity.
for now, yeah.
Tess, let's talk about technical de-risking.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, I think a big part of de-risking things technically is actually also a little bit social in a way. And so, you know, I've talked about the way that Interchain and Cosmos have tried to provide, you know, great technical primitives to teams who want to build, you know, interoperable blockchains. But we also really try to provide support on like a, you know, like one of the core teams in the Cosmos ecosystem is called Informal Systems, and they do all this formal verification, including for other like Cosmos projects. They do a lot of audits. There's a lot of like model-based testing and really cool verification techniques that they do and provide. And so it's actually like, I think for us, a lot of building this multi-chain future is not just about creating the right technical foundation. Mm-hmm. It's also about creating like the right, you know, social foundation, kind of entity structure, all that stuff that really lets us like support each other through all of this and try to, you know, share expertise and make sure that things are as solid as possible.
What do you all think the limit is in terms of the number of base layer chains, right? Because I think we agree that we're in a multi-chain future. There's going to be an explosion of assets, but I don't think we're going to have even like Dunbar's number, like 140 like blockchains. It's just way too much bandwidth and kind of complexity for any developer to really take in. So, and I know you're very eager to answer this, so I want you to answer first, Tess. But how do you view this ultimately shaping up? Is it going to be half a dozen? Is it going to be a dozen? I don't think it's going to be hundreds as you think about the lowest layers of the stack, but you're smiling, so.
Well, I just wanted to ask you, Ryan, like when you say base layer blockchains, like what does that actually really mean? Are you talking about like blockchain protocols? You know, would you consider something like Terra is a Cosmos SDK
I would think
chain?
about like enabling blockchains that are ultimately processing transactions for a variety of markets, right? So Ethereum being the base layer for ERC20s, Cosmos originally being the base layer, arguably for Terra. Now Terra is kind of moving into more layer one and facilitating a number of applications on top of it. Where do we ultimately like draw the org chart, I guess, right? Like there's how many layer zeros is like the oligopoly of like core standards, and then there's this number of layer ones, and then there's this number of either parachains or chains that plug into the IBC. What does this look like at scale before people's heads just explode and they can't deal with it?
Well, I mean, so Tess, like Cosmos sharding technology, yes or no?
Like, is it a sharding technology?
Well, because like a lot of these zones are essentially shards. They're just branded.
Yeah, I mean, I think that they're, yeah, I think they're kind of like two angles on similar solutions, or like two ways of solving similar problems.
Right.
But just to answer your question really
Okay, yeah,
directly.
we'll come back to that.
Okay.
Answer mine first, and then I want to hear about.
I would just say I think there actually isn't a limit on how many blockchains we can have, because I think you actually really can have application-specific blockchains. Now, it's going to be a requirement that there are, you know, some shared foundations between them, but that doesn't necessarily mean sharing a validator set or sharing a transaction history. You know, they can all have their own transaction histories. I do think there is a limiting factor on like our collective capacity for like understanding different, you know, models and different ways of doing all these things. And you know, if we have, you know, 10,000 different protocols, it's going to be really hard to write safe bridges between all those protocols, right? But I think there's a distinction to be made between different blockchains and different like styles of blockchains. And I think we could have a lot of, you know, if you think of a blockchain as that actual distributed ledger itself, I think we could see a lot. I think we could see tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, as we, you know, support this incredible diversity of projects and applications that we're starting to see.
We've got about 5 minutes left. I think we've been doing a pretty good job of balancing the technical, the very meta. This is kind of a meta conversation because that's the kind of phase in the market cycle that we're in, given how important this is. It's a lot easier for folks to come on stage and talk about NFTs and DeFi because you can see them, right? You can see the cats, you can see and understand kind of the decentralized finance realm because it looks a lot like the old finance realm, but decentralized. As you maybe just to kind of put a bow on this conversation, why don't we talk about case studies, right? Like what are the ways that people could visualize the progress that's actually getting achieved with scaling and all these other interoperable chains? Doe, I'm sure you might want to kick this one off because I think case studies about projects that are successfully going multi-chain is going to be important to highlight and point to as case studies and kind of the roadmap for other smaller teams that have to start on Ethereum because that's where all the infrastructure is. And then like where they go next becomes the next question. So Doe, maybe you and then obviously Tegan, you all are enabling a lot of this.
Yeah, so I think you guys touched upon this a little bit during Gavin's conversation, but I think it really depends on like where you zoom in terms of how many blockchains there will be in the world. So for example, for Cosmos, if the topology of the IBC network is such that there's sort of like a couple of centralized hubs and then all these zones sort of validating through these hubs, then you can arguably see a world where in truth, there's sort of a couple of validator sets that are animating the entire network, and sort of the other networks are sort of apps, if you will. Whereas, same could be said for Polkadot. Whereas, sort of these general purpose layer 1 blockchains like Ethereum, Solana, they're sort of pursuing a different vision, right? But the way that I see it is that ultimately there's going to be multiple different state machines that are validating different types of applications, simply because you can't have just a handful of state machines validate everything. They're just finite laws in how much you can sort of stretch the block space, and whereas need for computation is infinite. So once you have that, then I think it's just a branding exercise in terms of what exactly you call a blockchain, right? It could be Ethereum and a bunch of layer 2s, which are indeed like sort of their own state machines, branded as the one blockchain ecosystem, or it could be 20,000.
Who are some teams that have gone multi-chain successfully, Tegan?
Yeah, I mean, we're seeing it with Uniswap right now. So Uniswap kind of started on Ethereum. Now they're moved to Optimism. They're moving to Arbitrum. So kind of more of the layer 2 ecosystem. But right now, I mean, I believe that there's about 4 billion across bridges not on Polygon, which is a huge number. And it really kind of shows that it makes it real, right, that this is happening. But we need liquidity on each chain, and we don't just need bridges to every chain, we need bridges that can handle the capacity we need them to.
So that's arguably L1 and L2 interoperability. But Tess, why don't we close with you? Any good case studies for teams that have gone successfully multi-chain, EVM, IBC, Polkadot, otherwise?
I mean, I think in the Cosmos ecosystem, the project that is successfully facilitating this multi-chain world right now is the Osmosis project, which is a DEX, but it's its own chain. And I think that's actually kind of what we're going to start to see more and more in the Cosmos ecosystem is these applications, and Doe kind of alluded to this as well, but these things that might be either layer 2s or like Ethereum applications actually get their own chain and their own ledger history on Cosmos. And that also lets them kind of isolate the risk from the other parts of the network, which I think is pretty neat. But yeah, I would definitely point to Osmosis as an example of a project that is really orchestrating and connecting projects and really just making it easy for people who are already in the Cosmos ecosystem, whether they're Atom holders or have other IBC-enabled tokens, to actually go out and then invest in other smaller projects, because it just becomes so easy to swap those tokens out or provide liquidity, do all that kind of good stuff. So
maybe we'll do with 1 minute a lightning round. What are you most looking forward to the next 6 to 12 months, either for your projects or in general?
Columbus 5.
To the Luna.
I'm looking forward to like ZK Sync kind of coming more to fruition and really kind of adding support for Solana and Near and many other non-EVM compatible chains.
I mentioned this earlier, but interchain security, I think it's going to be a game changer for Cosmos.
Amazing. Well, Tess, Tegan, Do, thank you so much. It was a great morning session. Hope you all enjoyed it. And we'll see you back here this afternoon.